What is going on? What's happening? This is Coach Coleman, Jesse Coleman. Welcome to Breakthrough Blueprint, the podcast where we help you tap into your full potential. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is 2026. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody. It is crazy that we are in the new year already. Um, I, and I think honestly, I am at, if I'm not mistaken, almost up to my, 1 year anniversary of doing Breakthrough Blueprint, the podcast. I definitely have to check. I didn't think about that until actually right now as I was doing the intro. Like, wait a minute, I'm coming up on a year of actually doing this, which is crazy. So, shout out to me. I am going to double check to see exactly when was that, first year of actually, first time of actually doing this, so I can make sure I do an actual, 1 year anniversary type thing. But it's a lot of catching up to do. I hope you all had a happy new year. Hope it was safe. Hope you got to spend time with your loved ones. I hope you got time to decompress and relax and just chill. Like last year was a rough year. We know that it is what it is. We're not going to dwell on it, but for real, I hope you got the chance to just relax. A lot of going on in the sports world, especially for my Michigan Wolverines, the football team. Like, whole mess going on up and from Christmas up until now. We got a new coach. I'm excited about that. Whole new coaching staff. See what we're going to do in the transfer portal. Hoping Bryce stay. Like, it's a whole bunch going on with that. So excited for the direction we're going there. Then the basketball team, what, 14 and 0 right now, 13 and 0, 14 and 0, beating people by, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was about 32.1 point differential. Like, they're not just winning, they are beating teams by more than 20 points day in, day out. We know that that's not going to be sustainable, especially with the season going on and things like that. Like they're bound to have some off nights. But the crazy part about that is they had an off night their last game, and they still won by 40 points, and they were like 6 from 30 from the 3 point line. Like that is a scary team when you are you know shooting terrible from the field, but yet you still win by 40. So excited about that. Then my Chicago Bears, we locked up a second, um, the second spot in the NFC, and we got the fucking Green Bay Packers first game of the season, but here, I mean, first playoff, round of the playoff here in Chicago. So I'm excited about that. But enough about that. Enough about sports. Hope everybody had a happy new year. And going into 2026, I have been very purposeful about the books that I'm going to be reading. And there's one book that I'm reading right now. Shout out to my girl Liz Elizabeth Rayner for getting me this book. It's called Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. So if you're looking on YouTube, I just put the book up there, so definitely check it out by Jay Shetty, Think Like a Monk. And I am only within the first part of the book. I just started reading it, at the top of the year, and there was some things that stuck out to me that I that's what I want to focus on for this quick episode of the pod, is just to highlight some of the things from his book. I'm excited to see him in person in Atlanta, Georgia, in February, so that's gonna be dope at our conference. But it's called Think Like a Monk, and for you all who are not familiar with Jay Shetty, it was an individual that he decided not to do college. He wanted to become a monk, but he ended up going, finishing college, but he took the time to go become a monk. And there were some things that he really highlighted that I want to tap into as we are, getting ready for the new year, as we're going into, bettering ourselves to be able to do the things that we want to do. And part one is called Let Go, right? And the first section of that, it is talking about the identity. I am what I think I am. And here's the very first line of that. It says in 1902, the Scientologist Charles Horton Cooley wrote, I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. And for us going into 2026, we have to stop worrying about what other people think that we are. And that's what this quote is. And again, it says, and remember, he wrote this in 1902. So we are here, 2026. This is 1902, and it says, I am not what I think I am. I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. And too often we we worry about how people view us. And we have to stop doing that. We worry about people who really don't matter. And I will say this, sometimes people that are closest to us, family, friends, loved ones, we kind of, think about how they feel about us in certain situations. Yet we have to stop living our life like that. And one part of the book where he talked about what that is, he was worried about how his family, because he came from a Indian, he's Indian, and he came from where they were like, hey, these are the only things that you're gonna do, right? And for him to say, "Hey, I am not going to do these things anymore. I'm going to become a monk." He had to be in the mindset and come from a place of, "Yes, I know these people love me and they want the best for me, yet my life can't be determined on how they view me and what I do and what I shouldn't do." So what are some things that you're thinking about doing in 2026 and you're worried about what somebody else is going to think about what it is that you do? And when you really think about that, it is so crazy that we don't we really care more about what somebody else think about what we do than what we think about ourselves and how we want to be able to be happy and go a different direction that we want to go, that we may not be, it may not be the status quo, it may not be what everybody think we should do, but yet we still say, hey, I am going to do that anyway, right? Here's another quote, and it says, we live in a perception of ourselves. I read that again. We live in a perception of ourselves, and we've lost our real selves as a result. How can we recognize who we are and what makes us happy when we are chasing the distorted reflection of someone else's dreams? I'm going to read that again. We live in a perception of ourselves. We've lost our real selves as a result. How can we recognize who we are and what makes us happy when we're chasing the distorted reflection of somebody else's dreams? How can we be our authentic self if we're chasing a distorted reflection of someone else's dreams? So again, that goes back to, is it possibly, your parents? Is it possibly your siblings? Is it possibly your spouse? Is it your environment? Is it your friends? How can we be happy if we're chasing the distorted reflection of someone else's dream? That's the key word, the distorted. How can we be happy about those things if we're not living true to us and not worried about other people and figuring that we need to chase their dreams, right? Here's another one, a key point that I really love. When you try to live your most authentic life, some of your relationships will be put in jeopardy. Losing them is a risk worth bearing. Finding a way to keep them in your life is a challenge worth taking on. Now, what that means is, when you're trying to live the true you, you're going to put some of those relationships in jeopardy. And let's think about that. For my people who used to be heavy partiers, drinkers, or smokers, and things like that, think about how some of your relationships didn't sustain you making that decision to do something different. Think about it. If you're like, hey, I'm not going to be going out too often because I'm taking a step back from drinking, or I'm not partaking in these type of things. Some of those relationships are going to get it put it, be in jeopardy and put at risk, but it's worth it though. Now, the last part of that it says finding a way to keep them in your life is a challenge worth taking on. Now, it may be some situations where you decide, hey, you're not drinking, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, and the challenge is you living the way you want to live. You're showing up a certain way that the individuals that you used to be with may they probably see that and be like, man, maybe that's a direction I need to go. Maybe that's a route I need to go down because they see how you are operating. It's the same thing like when I talk about my group of individuals that I like to, that I'm around and I like to, spend time with, I like to learn from is that they were stepping up in a certain direction. They were stepping up in certain areas of their life. And by them doing that, it created a thing of like, hey, if you're still going to be a part of my circle, if you're still going to be a part of my life, you're going to need to, you know, elevate your life. You need to elevate what it is you're doing. That way we can still be in that same circle. And one thing we have to remember that can go one of two ways. That's why we have to be very conscious about who we're around and the things that we are letting in because you can be around a group of people that's going to be doing the wrong things and you have to make that decision on okay, do I still want to be in this group? Do I want to be around them? Okay, I may have to do these things. Or the other way of like, man, they're changing their life, they're doing, what it is they need to do. I don't want to get left behind, so let me step up what I'm doing so I can stay involved in that circle, right? So that's one of the things you got to really, pay attention when you are making those changes that there's going to be some relationships that's in jeopardy and you have to be okay with that. Here's another quote that I read, and I'm flipping through the first part of it, and I am not gonna butcher the name, but if you get the book, it's on page 8 of section 1, right? And then this is the last part of the saying, but it's from one of the senior monks. And the senior monks, matter of fact, I'll read the whole thing. Let's make it even better. I'll read the whole thing for you. So pretty much he was in a storeroom with another monk. And he said, we are in a storeroom lined with unused books and boxes full of artifacts. Unlike the rest of the ashram, which is always tidy and well swept, this place is dusty and draped in cobwebs. The senior monk leads me up to a mirror and says, what can you see? Through the thick layer of dust, I can't even see my reflection. I say as much as the monk nod. I say as much, and the monk nods. Then he wipes his arm of his robe across the glass. A cloud of dust puffs into my face, stinging my eyes and filling my throat. He says, your identity is a mirror covered with dust. When you first look in the mirror, the truth of who you are and what you value is obscured. Clearing it may not be pleasant, but only when that dust is gone can you see your true reflection. I'll read that last part again because that's the point I wanted to touch on. Your identity is a mirror covered with dust. When you first look in the mirror, the truth of who you are and what you value is obscured. Clearing it may not be pleasant, but only when the dust is gone can you see your true reflections. So this is goes back to, when we always talk about who are you? And when we ask who are you, you have to be real, you have to be right about who you are, your flaws and all. You can't sugarcoat, you can't BS, you can't let yourself off the hook. You have to be real and right about who you are. And that's what he's saying in this quote is your identity is covered in dust. The first time you look at it, it's going to be everything's going to be obscured. You can't really see the true visible. Yet when you wipe past that dust, it's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be uncomfortable. At that point, then you will be able to say, "Hey, this is who I really am. Here are the changes that I need to make." Right. Another part of that is when he's talking about those things and your identity, and the reflection or the aspect of worrying about what other people say. He talk about it's so many way different areas that we have to worry about these things. The internet, TV, if you're in school, your job, your family, your mom, your dad, magazines, news, life, friends, like all of these things play a big part of putting this fake false perception of who you should be. And too often people worry about what those perceptions are. That's when we go to this quote where he talk about the dust covered mirror. As long as you're worried about who somebody else think you should be, your mirror is going to be covered in dust. It's going to be uncomfortable when you clean that mirror, but yet once you clean that mirror, you get a clear vision. You get a clear view of exactly who you are and what changes you want to make. And then that's when he follow up and he talk about the media mind game. And in one of the exercises, he asks, "Where did your values come from?" So we all have values. Some of us are more intentional and purposeful about our values, where we write down what those values are. Like for me, I have some core values that honestly I have to redo going into 2026. But even if you are not purposeful about writing your values down, you have some form of values. And then what he says, he gives a few values: kindness, appearance, wealth, good grades, knowledge, family. And then after you have your values, he say your values came from somewhere. There was an origin for those values. So the origin could be your parents, it could be social media, it could be school, it can be your traditions, it can be your upbringing, your environment. It could be all of these things. Yeah, you have to make a decision: is are those values true to you or not? If it's true to you, you say, hey, yes, the values of kindness, it came from my parents. That is true. Or it can say, hey, knowledge, value of knowledge, the origin of that came from school. Yes, that's true to me. You have to figure out what your values are for you and then be clear of, okay, where did I get this? Because we're all programmed in some form of fashion. How was I programmed to have these values, and are these values true to me? Now, once you have those values, and then to go into that, he says, nothing took the place of the distraction except space, stillness, and silence. So here we're talking about going into a place of cutting out a lot of things and you're having that alone time. When we tune out the opinions, expectations, and the obligations of the world around us, we begin to hear ourselves in silence. So what that means is that we have social media, we have all these things. Once we have to be able to give ourselves some time to be alone, to be in silence. Once we tune out again those opinions, expectations, and obligations of the world around us, we begin to hear ourselves. Are we being true to ourselves? Are we, what we're doing is what we're doing really what we want to do? And then the last part is I really like. He go through and he talk about an audit of your life. So doing an audit of your time, what are you spending your time on? Are you spending your time on your core values? So that could be your family, your friends, your health, you know, yourself, your career. Like, what are you spending time on? And then when you're doing an audit of your time, you can say, hey, are these things that I'm spending time on a part of my values, and are they getting me closer to the goal I want to achieve? The next part is he talked about, doing an audit of media. He said when you did your audit, you saw significant amount of your time was spent on reading or viewing media, but also a little bit of that time is spent on just regular social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever sites you're on. Is that time you spending on these things something that aligns with your values or getting you closer to your goal? Then the last one was money. Do an audit of your money. Again, all of these things that we're talking about is going back to your identity. Who are you? A lot of these things play a part of that. And when it comes to money, here's something beautiful when he talked about money that I love. He says, like time, you can look at money you spend to see the values by which you live. Exclude necessities like home, dependents, car, bills, food, and debt. Now look at your discretionary spending. What was your biggest investment this month? Which discretionary areas are costing you the most? Does your spending correlate with what matters most to you? He talked about time and money. A 60-minute TV show will say, hey, that flew by. But a 60-minute lunch with our family and friends, we will sometimes say, this takes forever. This will never end, right? Everyday coffee habits. I'm sorry for my coffee drinkers. He said everyday coffee habits, $4 a day, almost 1,500 a year. We say, man, I can't. I need my coffee. I can't operate without my coffee. But yet, in the very next breath, when we talk about fresh food, fresh healthy food choices, an extra $1.50 a $1.50 a day, about $550 a year, we say it's not worth it, right? We would spend money. We spend money on things we deem are worth it. And I am guilty of this next one. 15 minutes scrolling social media. That's me time. That's how I decompress. That's how I relax. 15 minutes of meditation. Be like, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to meditate today. I didn't have time to journal today. I didn't have time to stretch. I didn't have time to do yoga, but I had 2 hours to scroll social media to see what's going on. So we got to do an audit of our time. We got to do an audit of our money, and we got to do an audit of our media to be able to make sure that it aligns with our value. And then we go into how do you curate your value? Higher values propel and elevate us toward happiness, fulfillment, and meaning. Lower values demote us towards anxiety, depression, and suffering. How do you curate your value? We talked about that. Like, what are your values? What do you want to stand for and live by? But then also, we got to remember that we have to make sure that the people that we are around is also in alignment with those things. And here's a funny thing about it too, where he says there are more lower values than there are higher values. So there are six lower values, but there's less higher values. Here go the six lower values: are greed, lust, anger, ego, illusion, and envy. The downside of the lower values is that they so readily take us over when we give them space to do so. We give more space to the lower values than we do higher values, and that's the reason why we we struggle with a lot of things. And here's how I want to end up on a lot of those things. Again, think like a monk. You got to get, if you don't have it, get it. It is an amazing book. And the first point I really want to hit on is, the new year, new you. Unless your identity changes, unless your core value changes, unless the way you operate change, it doesn't matter if there's a new year, you're still going to be the same old you. And I am going to say this quote, and you all have heard it before, so you're probably getting tired of it. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of who you believe you are, aka you fall to the level of your standards. So you can't have a new year, new you if your identity stays the same. We have to remember our thoughts become beliefs, our beliefs become our identity becomes our behavior. So again, we can't worry about who somebody else think we are. We have to have those beliefs in ourselves, and our beliefs become our identity, and our identity becomes our behavior. And that goes back to self-talk. How are we talking to ourselves? What are the conversations we are having with ourselves? What are the stories you keep repeating to yourself too? That is another aspect of the book that he was talking about. Of and I am guilty of this of saying certain things like, "Man, I just cannot concentrate. Man, I'm not disciplined enough," or "I kind of struggle with this." Like putting those things in our mind. We're sabotaging our growth because we're constantly saying these things to ourselves. And as we say these things to ourselves, we start believing, and that's how we start operating. What is your identity in business? We talked a little bit about personal, but what is your identity in business? Do you see yourself as a CEO, a business owner, an entrepreneur that should be in the Forbes top 100? Like for real, do you see yourself as one of those individuals? Do you see yourself as a real estate agent that runs a multi six figure organization or a seven figure organization? If you don't see yourself as that, you're not going to start operating as that. Identity first, habit second, results last. We have to have a clear identity of who we are. Then we have to create the habits around that. And then once we have the habits, we have the results. We have to have that confidence in ourselves. Again, it's going to be hard, but like Jay said, when you remove the dust from the mirror and be honest and be real with yourself, that's how you're going to be able to see your true self. And I want to leave you all with a few key things around that is how to rewrite your identity. So you have to have awareness, catching the old thoughts. I caught myself having a few old thoughts this past weekend. I mean, crazy. So what did I have to start by doing? I had awareness around that. And then you have to have the interruption. So you start challenging it. You have those old thoughts, you catch it, you have the awareness around it, then you start challenging it. Uh, Give a pushback. The same way we push back on other people that say certain stuff that we don't like, we have to push back on ourselves. And then once we push back on ourselves, now we have the replacement. We have to install a new identity statement. So I catch myself having those old thoughts like, damn, I don't really, I don't feel like I can, accomplish this. Then I challenge you to say, okay, why do you feel like you can accomplish that? Once I challenge it, then I had to install a new identity statement. Like, hey, I can accomplish this if I show up as A, B, C, and D. And then after that, now it's just repetition. Identity is trained, not discovered. So we get the identity, we change our thinking around it, and then it's like, okay, this is how I'm showing up on a consistent basis. Here's my challenge to you. You guys know I love when I do solo episodes. I leave you all with three challenges. I want you to write down three identity statements that you've been living from. Then once you do that, I want you to cross out the one that no longer serves you. And then I want you to write three identity statements for the version of you that you're becoming in 2026. So again, first part of that challenge is write down three identity statements that you've been living from. Cross out the ones that no longer serve you. And then the last part of that, write down three identity statements for the version of you who you're becoming in 2026. And remember, as I always say, you are already the person you want to become. You just have to tap into that. This is a part of tapping into that, of being real, being right, being clear about what that is, highlighting it, and going from there. Let me go back again because I don't want to just go past this. So I'm going to go back to when we talked about how to rewrite your identity. So remember, awareness, interruption, replacement, and repetition. Awareness, interruption, replacement, repetition. Right? So I'm looking forward to another great year of Breakthrough Blueprint with you all. Yes, the book is still coming this year. Don't worry about it. A little bit behind schedule, and the book is still coming this year. New workshop coming, Execution Lab, the follow up to Breakthrough Blueprint. We're working, we're traveling, going across the world, pouring into people, teaching. That we're gonna have a great year. And that's when I say we, I mean all of us. Everybody that listen to this, that hit me up on social media. We're gonna help each other make through whatever we're going through. We're gonna have a great year. We're gonna rock and roll. And again, I love you all. This is Coach Coleman, Jesse Coleman. Thanks for checking into Breakthrough Blueprint to Podcast. First episode of season 3, first episode of 2026. Thanks for checking in. Love you all. Peace.
Fresh Production.